I was staring at the signed marriage certificate when he turned to me with a smirk that didn't reach his eyes. "Now you're mine," he said coldly. "Let's see how long you last." That night, on our wedding night, he slept on the couch. No explanation, no affection, just silence that cut deeper than any argument could. I sat alone in our hotel suite, still wearing my white dress, mascara streaking down my face. The champagne he poured sat untouched on the table. I didn't understand what I'd done wrong. The man who'd proposed to me 6 months ago with tears in his eyes now looked at me like I was his enemy. I replayed every moment of our courtship, searching for clues I'd missed. The way his smile sometimes faltered, the strange questions about my family, the times he'd zone out when I talked about my past. Something was wrong. Something had always been wrong. I just hadn't seen it. When morning came, he acted like nothing happened. Made coffee, kissed my forehead, said we'd be late for our flight to Paris. But his eyes remained empty, and I knew deep in my bones that I had just married a man who hated me. I didn't cry that second night either. I sat on the balcony of our Paris hotel, watching the city lights blur through unshed tears, trying to piece together what was happening. He'd barely spoken to me on the plane. In the city of love, he walked 3 steps ahead, never holding my hand. When tourists asked to take our photo, he smiled perfectly. The moment they left, his face went blank again. This wasn't cold feet. This was calculated cruelty. I started reviewing everything I knew about him. His name was Silas Harding. We'd met at a networking event 8 months ago. He worked in corporate law. He was charming, successful, attentive. He'd pursued me relentlessly, showing up at my office with coffee, texting me goodnight every evening, talking about forever after just 3 months. I thought it was romantic. Now it felt like a setup. On our third day in Paris, I asked him directly, "Why did you marry me if you hate me?" He looked up from his phone, expression neutral. "Hate is a strong word, Ren. Let's call it justice." Then he left for a business call that lasted 4 hours. Justice for what? I had no idea. But I was going to find out. My name is Ren Everin. I'm 34 years old. I work as a financial consultant at Hawthorne and Bell, one of the most competitive firms in the city. I'd just made junior partner 3 months before the wedding. It had taken me 11 years of 16-hour days, missed birthdays, and sacrificed relationships to get there. I grew up in foster care after my parents died in a car accident when I was 7. I put myself through college working 3 jobs. I had no family, few friends, and a work ethic that people either admired or feared. I was used to being alone, used to fighting for everything. So when Silas came into my life with his easy smile and promises of partnership, of being a team, I fell hard. I'd never had anyone choose me before. Never had someone look at me like I was their everything. Turns out I still hadn't. 2 days after we returned from Paris, I was expected back at my desk like nothing had changed. Silas dropped me off at work with a kiss on the cheek that felt like ice. My colleague Nora noticed immediately. "You okay?" she asked, scanning my face. "Perfect," I lied. And that's when I made my decision. If I wanted the truth, I had to play his game. The first real clue came 3 weeks into our marriage. We were having dinner with some of his law school friends at an upscale restaurant downtown. Everyone was laughing, trading stories, talking about old times. Silas had his arm around my chair, playing the devoted husband perfectly. Then, between sips of scotch, he leaned over and said casually, "Your brother was always the favorite, wasn't he?" I froze. My fork stopped halfway to my mouth. I'd never told Silas about my brother. Not once. Not his name, not his story, nothing. After my parents died, I was separated from my younger brother in the foster system. His name was Corey. He was only 4 when we were split up. I spent years trying to find him, but the records were sealed. Eventually, I had to let go just to survive. I looked at Silas, heart pounding. "What did you say?" He smiled, squeezing my shoulder. "Just making conversation, darling. You mentioned him once, remember?" I hadn't. I knew I hadn't. But his friends were watching, so I forced a laugh and changed the subject. Later that night, I lay awake while he slept peacefully beside me. How did he know about Corey? And why would he bring it up like that? So casually, like he was testing me. I started digging. Carefully, quietly, I went through our apartment when he was at work, searching for anything that might explain his behavior. In his home office, locked in the bottom drawer of his desk, I found a folder. Just one. It was labeled with my initials, W.E. My hand shook as I opened it. Inside were printed copies of my resume, my LinkedIn profile, articles I'd written for industry journals, screenshots of my social media posts going back years. There were photos too. Old ones. Me at college graduation. Me at my first job. Me at a work conference 2 years ago. And then I found something that made my blood turn to ice. A photocopy of a police report from 12 years ago. An incident report from my college campus. The night that changed everything. The night I tried to forget. My name was listed as a witness. And there, under involved parties, was another name I recognized. Not my brother's, but someone connected to him. Someone whose face I'd buried deep in my memory. The pieces started clicking together. Silas didn't marry me because he loved me. He married me because of something that happened 12 years ago. Something he believed I was responsible for. And now he wanted revenge. 12 years ago, I was a senior in college, working 2 jobs and barely sleeping. One night, I was leaving the library late when I heard shouting near the student center. 2 guys were fighting. Really fighting. One of them was drunk, screaming incoherently, throwing wild punches. The other was trying to restrain him, begging him to stop. I recognized the drunk one. His name was Hugo. He lived in my dorm building. Quiet kid, kept to himself, always looked stressed. I'd heard rumors he was struggling, failing classes, family pressure. The other guy I didn't know. I ran over to help, trying to pull Hugo back. He shoved me hard. I fell. Campus security arrived minutes later. Hugo was arrested. The other guy disappeared before they could get his name. I gave my statement and left. 2 weeks later, I heard Hugo had been expelled and hospitalized. I felt terrible, but there was nothing I could do. I finished school and moved on with my life. Until now. Because as I stared at that police report, I saw something I'd missed 12 years ago. The unknown male listed in the report had a partial description. And a first name, Silas. He'd been there that night. And somehow he blamed me for what happened to Hugo. I confronted him that evening. Calm. Direct. No tears. Who was Hugo to you? I asked, standing in the kitchen while he poured himself wine. He didn't even flinch. Just smiled that cold smile and said, my younger brother. My stomach dropped. He had a breakdown. You were there. You testified. He got expelled. Hospitalized. His life ended that night. I shook my head. I didn't testify against him. I gave a witness statement. I tried to help him. I tried to stop the fight. Silas laughed bitterly. You were the reason security came. You were the reason he got arrested. You ruined him. He was drunk and violent. He needed help. That wasn't my fault, wasn't it? He stepped closer, voice dropping to a whisper. He told me what really happened that night. What you said to him before the fight started. How you humiliated him. Pushed him over the edge. I stared at him, confused. I never spoke to Hugo that night before the fight. I didn't even know him. Liar, he hissed. Then he walked away, leaving me standing there with more questions than answers. Because if he believed I'd done something I hadn't, someone had lied to him. And I needed to know who. And why. He started gaslighting me in small ways. You never mentioned your promotion, he'd say at dinner, even though I'd told him 3 times. Are you sure you sent that email? He'd ask when I couldn't find something at work. You seem forgetful lately. Stressed. Maybe you should see someone. At first, I doubted myself. Checked my sent folder obsessively. Wrote everything down twice. Then I realized what he was doing. He was trying to make me question my reality. Make me seem unstable. Unreliable. One morning, I found my car keys in the freezer. I knew I'd left them on the hook by the door. You must have put them there, Silas said, concerned. Ren, that's not normal. But I'd started setting up my phone to record when I left rooms. I had proof I hadn't touched those keys. He was moving things, changing things, building a narrative. I didn't confront him. Instead, I started my own documentation. I bought a small recording device. Started saving every text message, every email, Every conversation. If he wanted to play psychological warfare, fine. But I was going to win. Because he'd made one critical mistake. He thought I was the weak, guilty girl from 12 years ago. But I wasn't her anymore. The sabotage at work started subtly. A client meeting I was supposed to lead got rescheduled without my knowledge. Files I'd prepared went missing from the shared drive. Then came the big one. I was pitching for a major account, something that could secure my position as partner permanently. I'd worked on the presentation for 6 weeks. The night before, I sent the final version to our team folder and went to bed relieved. The next morning, in front of the client and the senior partners, I opened the file. It was wrong. Completely wrong. Slides were out of order. Data was incorrect. My name was on it, but it wasn't my work. I stumbled through the presentation, humiliated. We lost the account. Afterward, my boss pulled me aside. Ren, is everything okay at home? You seem distracted lately. I wanted to scream. Instead, I smiled and said, I'm fine. I'll do better. That night, Silas asked how my day went. When I told him, he looked sympathetic. Maybe you're just overwhelmed, sweetheart. Marriage is a big adjustment. Work stress, new responsibilities. It's a lot. He was so convincing, so caring. If I hadn't known better, I would have believed him. But I checked my email logs. The file had been accessed from an unknown IP address at 2 in the morning. His IP address. I started testing him, leaving fake information around the apartment, telling him false plans to see which ones got sabotaged, watching his reactions when I mentioned certain names or dates. He was good at hiding it, but not perfect. One night, after I'd had a glass of wine, I pretended to be tipsy and emotional. Sometimes I wonder if you ever really loved me, I said, letting my voice break. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he smiled, pulled me close, and whispered, Love is just a word, Ren. What matters is commitment. And I'm very committed to this marriage. It was the most honest thing he'd said to me in weeks. And it confirmed everything. This wasn't about love. It was about revenge. About making me pay for something I didn't do. But here's what he didn't understand. I didn't need his love. I didn't need his approval. I just needed evidence. And time. Because the more he pushed, the more he revealed. Every cruel comment. Every manipulative move. Every gaslighting attempt. I was documenting all of it. Building my case while he thought he was winning. Silas believed he was destroying me slowly. But really, he was destroying himself. And I was just watching. Waiting. Documenting. I tracked down Hugo. It took 3 weeks and a private investigator I couldn't afford, but I found him. He was living in a supported housing facility 2 hours away. Still struggling with mental health issues. Still broken by what happened 12 years ago. I drove there on a Saturday while Silas thought I was at a work conference. The staff let me visit after I explained I was an old friend. When Hugo saw me, he didn't recognize me at first. Then his eyes widened. You, he whispered. The girl from that night. I'm sorry for what happened to you, I said gently. I never wanted that. He shook his head. It wasn't your fault. It was never your fault. My heart started racing. What do you mean? My brother told me you said terrible things to me. That you provoked me. But I don't remember that. I don't remember you being there until after the fight started. Then why did you tell him I was responsible? Hugo looked confused. I didn't. I told him I didn't remember what started it. That I'd been drinking and everything was blurry. He's the one who said you must have done something. He needed someone to blame. I felt cold all over. Hugo, who did you fight with that night? He closed his eyes. My brother. Silas. We fought about money. About me dropping out. He said I was an embarrassment. I lost control. The truth hit me like a truck. Silas wasn't angry at me for what happened to Hugo. He was angry at himself. And he'd spent 12 years building a lie to avoid that guilt. I requested the full police report through a lawyer. It took 2 weeks, but when it arrived, everything became clear. Multiple witnesses confirmed Hugo had been fighting with his brother. I was mentioned only as someone who tried to intervene. Security had been called by a different student entirely. Silas had left the scene before police arrived. The only reason Hugo was arrested was because he'd assaulted an officer when they tried to calm him down. Nothing about that night was my fault, but Silas had twisted it in his mind, created a narrative where I was the villain. Maybe because admitting he'd caused his brother's breakdown was too painful. Maybe because he needed someone to hate. Either way, he'd built his entire revenge plot on a lie, and he'd married me to destroy me for something I'd never done. I made copies of everything. The police report, Hugo's medical records with his permission, witness statements, a recorded conversation with Hugo's former therapist confirming the family dynamics. Then I locked it all in a safety deposit box at a bank across town. I wasn't ready to confront Silas yet, because if I played this right, I could do more than just prove my innocence. I could expose him for who he really was, a man so consumed by guilt and shame that he'd ruined an innocent person's life rather than face the truth. And I was going to make sure everyone knew it. He invited my colleagues to dinner at our apartment, his idea of playing the perfect husband. He cooked, poured wine, told charming stories about our fake love story. Then, while everyone was laughing, he said, "You know, Ren's family has quite a history with mental illness. Her brother, her extended family. It's genetic, really. Something to be aware of as we think about our future." The room went silent. I felt every eye turn to me. My trauma, my private pain, used as a dinner party joke. I could have screamed, could have thrown my wine in his face. Instead, I laughed. Silas loves his dark humor. Can't take him anywhere. I excused myself to the bathroom, locked the door, and pulled out my phone. Voice memo. October 15th. Public humiliation. Disclosure of private medical information. Witnesses present. When I came back, I was smiling, and I watched something flicker in his eyes. Confusion, maybe, because I wasn't reacting the way he expected. I was supposed to break, to cry, to prove his point about me being unstable. Instead, I was calm, collected, stronger than he wanted me to be. And that, I realized, scared him, because if I wasn't breaking, his entire plan was failing. And maybe, just maybe, he was starting to wonder who he'd really married. I scheduled a meeting with HR at my firm, not to report Silas directly, but to create a paper trail. "I'm experiencing some challenges in my personal life," I told them carefully. "Nothing that affects my work yet, but I want you to be aware that I may need to file a formal complaint soon regarding potential conflicts of interest and ethical concerns." The HR director, a sharp woman named Patricia, leaned forward. "Can you be more specific?" "Not yet, but I will be. Soon. I just need to make sure everything is documented properly first." She made notes, asked a few careful questions, then said, "We take these matters seriously, Ren. When you're ready, we'll listen." That conversation did exactly what I needed. It put them on alert, made them start watching, and when Silas inevitably tried to sabotage me again, they'd already have context. Sure enough, 3 days later, he called Patricia himself, said he was concerned about me, that I was acting erratically, forgetting things. He was trying to plant seeds, undermine my credibility before I could expose him. But Patricia called me immediately after. "Your husband just contacted me. I found it inappropriate and concerning. I wanted you to know." "Thank you," I said simply. And I made a note. Another piece of evidence. Another nail in his coffin. He thought he was being clever, but every move he made was just giving me more ammunition. My birthday came. He pretended to forget. No card, no gift, no acknowledgement. I waited all day, watching him perform his cruelty with precision. Then, that evening, I did something he didn't expect. I threw myself a party, invited colleagues, ordered catering, bought my own cake. When he came home to a house full of people celebrating me, his face went pale. "Surprise," I said, kissing his cheek. I decided not to wait for anyone else to celebrate me. "I'm worth celebrating." Everyone cheered. Someone handed him a drink. He had no choice but to smile and play along. But I saw it. The fury in his eyes. The realization that I wasn't crumbling. I was thriving. That night, after everyone left, he finally spoke. "You're not who I thought you were." "No," I agreed. "I'm not. I'm stronger. And smarter. And you're starting to realize you made a mistake." He stepped closer, jaw tight. "This isn't over." "I know," I said calmly. "But neither am I. For the first time since our wedding, I saw something that looked like fear in his eyes, because the woman he thought he could destroy was still standing, and she was just getting started. And maybe, just maybe, he was beginning to understand that he'd underestimated me from the beginning. That marrying me wasn't his victory. It was his biggest mistake. Silas made a critical error at work. He'd been consulting on a case with my firm, something we occasionally collaborated on. During a meeting with a major client, a junior associate asked him a question he didn't like. He snapped, loudly, viciously, in front of everyone. The associate, a young woman named Fiona, looked stunned. The client looked uncomfortable. Silas tried to recover, apologizing smoothly, but the damage was done. Fiona reported it immediately. Not to me, but to Patricia in HR. I only found out because Patricia called me in. "We've received a complaint about your husband's conduct during the Westwood meeting," she said carefully. "I wanted to make you aware before we proceed." "What kind of complaint?" "Verbal abuse. Inappropriate workplace behavior. Fiona is requesting we review his conduct on all collaborative projects." I nodded slowly. "I think that's fair." Patricia watched me carefully. "Ren, is this connected to what you mentioned last month?" "It might be." I handed her a flash drive I'd prepared. "These are recordings and documentation of similar incidents. Personal ones. But they establish a pattern." She took it, inserted it into her computer. As she listened and read, her expression darkened. When she finished, she looked at me with something like respect. "This is substantial and disturbing. I'm going to recommend a full investigation. Are you prepared for that?" "Yes," I said. "I've been preparing for weeks." While the investigation started at work, I went back to visit Hugo. This time I brought a lawyer. With Hugo's permission, we recorded a statement. His therapist joined us remotely. "Tell her what you told me," I said gently. Hugo took a shaky breath. "Silas used to control everything about my life. What I studied, who I spent time with. He said it was because he cared, but it wasn't. It was because he needed to be in charge. When I told him I wanted to drop out of school, he lost it. Said I was ruining the family name. That night we fought, he said things. Terrible things. I snapped. Started throwing punches. He fought back. Then he left before security came. And after, when I was hospitalized, he visited once. Told me it was my fault. That I'd embarrassed him. He never took responsibility." The therapist added, "Hugo's breakdown was exacerbated by long-term psychological abuse from a family member, specifically his brother. The incident that night was a culmination, not a singular event." "And the girl?" my lawyer asked. "The witness named Ren Everin?" Hugo shook his head. "She wasn't even there when it started. She tried to help. But Silas told me later that she'd provoked me. I was so confused, on so much medication, I didn't know what was real. Eventually, I started believing him. Until recently, when my memory got clearer." The lawyer turned off the recording, looked at me. "This changes everything. He's built his entire case on a fabricated narrative." "I know," I said. "And I'm going to make sure everyone else knows too." I decided it was time to confront Silas, not with anger, not with tears, with evidence. I waited until he came home from work, poured him his usual drink, then laid out files across our dining table. Police reports, hospital records, Hugo's recorded statement, the therapist's analysis, witness testimonies. I didn't say a word, just waited while he looked through each document, his face growing paler with every page. Finally, he looked up. "Where did you get these? Does it matter?" I asked calmly. "You married me for revenge. You sabotaged my career. You gaslit me. You humiliated me publicly. All because of something I didn't do. Something you did. I was protecting my brother. You were protecting yourself. From guilt. From responsibility. You convinced him and yourself that I was responsible, so you didn't have to admit that you broke him." Silas stood abruptly. You don't understand what it was like. Watching him fall apart. Knowing I couldn't fix it. "So you decided to break me instead? How did that help him? How did that help anyone?" He had no answer. Just stared at the evidence scattered between us. The truth he'd spent 12 years running from. "You're not the victim here, Silas," I continued. You never were. And now everyone is going to know that. I handed him one final document, a lawsuit filing for defamation, emotional abuse, workplace sabotage. You have 24 hours to respond, I said. Then I walked out, leaving him alone with his lies. Silas tried everything. First, he apologized, begged for forgiveness, said he'd been wrong, confused, that he loved me. I didn't respond. Then he tried threats, said he'd destroy my reputation, that he had connections, that I'd regret this. I forwarded his threatening messages to my lawyer and Patricia. Finally, he tried manipulation, showed up at my office with flowers, sent emails to my colleagues about my emotional instability and vindictive behavior. But by then, the investigation was official. HR had suspended him from all collaborative projects. My firm had cut ties with his company pending the outcome, and his own partners were asking questions, because everything I'd documented, every recording, every email, every witness statement, was now part of a formal legal proceeding. There was no hiding anymore, no spinning the narrative. The truth was public, documented, undeniable. I filed for separation, not divorce yet, just legal separation while the investigations continued. Moved my things out of our apartment into a small place across town. Nora helped me pack. I can't believe you held it together this long, she said, taping another box shut. I didn't have a choice, I replied. Breaking down wasn't going to save me. Evidence was. She hugged me. You're the strongest person I know. I didn't feel strong. I felt exhausted, but I also felt free. For the first time in months, I could breathe without wondering what he'd do next. Without calculating my every word and action, I was finally out, and he was finally exposed. The firm's investigation concluded 3 weeks later. The findings were damning. Silas had accessed confidential files without authorization, had contacted my clients inappropriately, had attempted to undermine my professional reputation through false statements. Patricia presented the findings to the senior partners. They voted unanimously to terminate all contracts with Silas's firm and to recommend formal ethics complaints to the state bar. My defamation lawsuit moved forward. My lawyer was confident. He's created a paper trail of his own misconduct, she explained. The recordings, the witnesses, Hugo's statement. It's overwhelming. What about the criminal aspects? I asked. The gaslighting, the psychological abuse. Harder to prosecute criminally, but excellent for civil court. We're pursuing damages for emotional distress, loss of professional opportunity, and reputational harm. We're talking significant numbers. I nodded. This wasn't about money for me. It was about justice, about accountability. But the money would be useful for Hugo. I'd already decided that any settlement would go toward his long-term care. Silas had destroyed his brother's life to avoid guilt. The least I could do was help rebuild it. Meanwhile, Silas's world was collapsing. His firm put him on indefinite leave. His professional reputation was in ruins. Mutual friends stopped returning his calls. And through it all, I remained calm, focused, strong, because this was never about revenge. It was about truth. And the truth, finally, was winning. The settlement hearing was brief. Silas's lawyer recommended he accept our terms rather than go to trial. Public exposure of the evidence would end his career permanently. So he agreed. Financial restitution for damages, public acknowledgement of his misconduct, a formal apology to Hugo, permanent restraining order preventing contact with me or my workplace. He signed everything without looking at me. When it was done, my lawyer turned to me with a small smile. It's over, but there was one more thing I needed to do. I requested permission to make a statement before we left. The mediator allowed it. I looked directly at Silas for the first time in weeks. You spent 12 years hating the wrong person, building a revenge plot against someone who tried to help. You married me to destroy me, and all you did was destroy yourself. I hope someday you find the courage to face what you did to your brother, to take real responsibility, because until you do, you'll never be free. His face was pale, empty. He said nothing. I stood, gathered my things, and walked out. Outside the courthouse, the sun was shining. I called Hugo to tell him about the settlement. He cried, "Thank you." You didn't have to do this. Yes, I did, I said. Because someone should have fought for you 12 years ago. Better late than never. That night, I celebrated quietly. No party. No champagne. Just peace. Pure, quiet peace. The nightmare was over. And I had survived. 3 months later, my life looked completely different. The firm promoted me to senior partner. My own office, my own team, my name on the door. Nora threw me a surprise party. This time, I didn't have to organize it myself. I was genuinely celebrated, genuinely valued. Silas's firm had quietly dissolved. Last I heard, he'd moved to another state, trying to rebuild under a different company name. I didn't follow his story. Didn't need to. He was no longer part of my narrative. Hugo was doing better. The settlement money funded proper treatment, stable housing, and therapy. He'd started painting. Something he said helped him process his trauma. He sent me a piece, an abstract landscape in blues and golds. I hung it in my new apartment, a reminder of survival, of truth, of healing. I started dating again, slowly, carefully, but without fear, because I'd learned something important. I could trust my instincts. I could protect myself. I could face manipulation and come out stronger. One evening, I received an email from Silas. Just one line, "I'm sorry." I didn't respond. Some apologies don't deserve acknowledgement. Some bridges should stay burned. Instead, I closed my laptop, poured myself a glass of wine, and looked out at the city lights. My city, my life, my future, built not on someone else's lies, but on my own truth. And that felt like the only revenge worth having. A year after the settlement, I was invited to speak at a conference about workplace ethics and personal resilience. I almost declined. Talking about what happened still felt raw, but something made me say yes. Standing on that stage, looking out at hundreds of faces, I told a version of my story. Not all the details, but the essence. Someone once tried to destroy me because they couldn't face their own guilt, I said. They married me with hatred in their heart, determined to break me. And for a while, I let them make me doubt myself, question my reality, wonder if maybe I deserved it. But then I remembered who I was. I documented. I gathered evidence. I stayed calm when they wanted me to rage. I built my case while they thought they were winning. And in the end, the truth did exactly what truth does. It won. The applause was thunderous. Afterward, dozens of people approached me, shared their own stories of gaslighting, manipulation, abuse, thanked me for speaking up. One woman, maybe 30, with tears in her eyes, grabbed my hand. "I'm living your story right now. My husband is doing exactly what you described. How did you stay strong?" I looked at her carefully. I decided I was worth fighting for, even when he told me I wasn't, even when I almost believed him. I chose myself, every single day, and eventually, that became easier than choosing his lies. She nodded, wiping her eyes. "Thank you. I needed to hear that." Watching her walk away, I realized something. My pain had become purpose. Silas had tried to destroy me, but instead, he created someone who could help others survive similar destruction. That was his final gift. Unintentional, unwanted, but real. He'd made me unbreakable. I never heard from Silas again after that one-line apology. No more emails. No attempts at contact. Just silence. Sometimes I wondered if he ever faced his guilt. If he ever apologized to Hugo properly. If he ever understood what he'd done. But mostly, I didn't think about him at all. Because healing isn't about them. It's about you. It's about rebuilding the parts of yourself they tried to demolish, relearning trust, rediscovering joy, remembering that their cruelty wasn't your fault. I threw myself into work, into friendships, into therapy. Started running again. Traveled to places I'd always wanted to see. Adopted a cat who became my perfect companion. Small things, normal things, things that felt revolutionary after months of psychological warfare. Hugo and I stayed in touch. Not constantly, but regularly. Birthday cards, occasional phone calls. He met someone, a kind man who worked at his facility. They moved in together. Started a small garden. He sent me photos of tomatoes, and sunflowers with captions like, "Look what we grew." It felt like healing in plant form. Slow, patient, beautiful. Nora became more than a colleague. She became family, the sister I'd never had. We had standing Sunday brunches where we talked about everything and nothing, where I could be completely myself, where my past didn't define my present. Life became simply good. Not perfect, not without hard days, but good, solid, mine. And that was more than enough. My name is still Ren Everin. I'm 36 now, senior partner at one of the best firms in the city. I live alone by choice in an apartment with too many plants and not enough furniture. I'm still learning how to let people in, still working through trust issues in therapy, still processing what happened. But I'm here, alive, thriving, free. Sometimes, late at night, I think about that wedding day. The moment he said, "Now you're mine." The coldness in his eyes. The beginning of the nightmare. And I'm grateful. Not for the pain. Never for that. But for what it taught me. That I'm stronger than I knew. That documentation beats emotion in any battle. That staying calm is more powerful than any rage. That truth eventually wins. That I'm worth fighting for. He married me out of hatred, determined to destroy me for sins I never committed. He manipulated, gaslit, sabotaged, and schemed. He wanted me broken. Instead, I broke free. And in doing so, I became the woman I was always meant to be. Not his victim. Not his target. Just myself. Fully. Finally. Completely. If you're watching this, if you're living a version of my story right now, know this. You're not crazy. You're not weak. You're not imagining it. Trust your instincts. Document everything. Stay calm. Build your case. And when the time is right, walk away with your head high and your evidence ready. Because you deserve more than their lies. You deserve truth, freedom, peace. You deserve to win. And you will. I did. And so can you.